Can't get enough sports shorts? Tune into Sports Shorts TV on Cox HD Channel 1013 Mondays at 8, Tuesdays at 9, and ETEL Channel 4. That's 52 weeks a year to get educated on sports by the best. Joel Davis and Ronnie Rance.
And welcome everyone to this week's edition of Sports Shorts presented by LeBears Casino. Ronnie Rance here, joined by a very special guest, the Executive Director of the Louisiana and High School Athletic Association, Mr. Eddie Bonine. How are you, sir?
Ronnie Rance, I'm good, man. Thank you for inviting me onto the show. I'm looking forward to having some dialogue with you here today.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, normally this time of the year would be a much better, positive, exciting time where we're getting ready for high school football and the upcoming calendar year of all the state championships. And we are, to a certain degree, still doing that. But right now, I don't envy you the position you're in, like a lot of business owners, like a lot of commissioners are. And that is, whatever you talk about today could all go out the window 24 hours from now and be a completely different conversation tomorrow. It's had to have been extremely frustrating since you first started having to deal with the whole COVID discussion around probably March 1st.
And it has, Ronnie, because we try to pride ourselves in being not only maybe one season but 2 seasons ahead in preparation and back in better words, being proactive. And now we become so doggone reactive to things. We try to put things in place, but you said it. What we may talk about today, being Monday, may not be what we do on Wednesday because something we find out on Tuesday. And I think that's the way a lot of people are doing this, including our governor, who's trying to do the best he can with the hand that's being dealt as well. So I think overall, from the time we learned about it in March, thinking it wasn't going to be, could potentially be something we're going to deal with April and May, we honestly thought that we were going to be able to get spring sports in. And I think that we waited as long as we could possibly wait before we had to cancel those, but also waited in our completion of our winter sports. You saw we waited and waited and waited, and we ended up playing those boys basketball championship games, the public schools portion of that, on Fridays and Saturday down in Lake Charles with nobody in the facility. So I think we're in a good spot to look at all that stuff. But gosh, who thought that we'd still be having this conversation today here in August when it's time to start getting football, volleyball, swimming, cross country, all of our fall sports up and running, actually starting today.
Before we, kind of timeline this piece and kind of get to where we are now, my question to you is, give the folks an update of where we're at the moment when it comes to fall sports, and we'll start with football. As of this taping on August the 3rd, where are we in relation to timeline and what does football and other fall sports look like right now for the LHSA?
Well, first of all, let's start with when we were back in March and April, because there is a rule in our book that specifically states for football that we have schools that have the option to play spring football, and then, of course, we start fall football now. But that said, those schools that are smaller classifications, they don't have enough athletes to play spring football and have a baseball team or track, if you will, then they can send us a communication deadline this month saying, hey, we're not going to play spring football. Here's why. Got it. That means that they can start a week earlier than everybody else. That's this week when this is taped, and August 3rd this week. So they're going to wear the helmets and the appropriate footwear, then rotate themselves into shoulder pads. But the actual original start date, which is still in place, will be next week. Will be next Monday for everybody else that didn't have the chance to actually play spring football. So that's number one. Next Monday is when all the other sports get the opportunity to start practicing. Where we are today, we're starting on time. We're going to continue to stay on time. But what's going to be effective will be when we start playing games, will be addressed this week. Only because there's an announcement will come from the governor either today or tomorrow announcing what phase we're going to be in, where we're going to go from there, and how it's going to work. With football, we still can't have full contact, Ronnie, and we won't be able to until we get to a minimum piece of phase 3 with 14 consecutive days of all the numbers going the opposite direction. And at that point, then we rely on Dr. Welch as well as Dr. Greg Stewart, our sports medicine advisor, to tell us, okay, we can start doing this and doing that. But for actually having volleyball competitions and cross-country competitions and swimming competitions, staff is working with those advisory committees today and tomorrow. We'll have something coming out this week. But there's an old saying where I come from that if you got an acre of grass and your riding mower's broke, but you got that old 20-inch Murray in the garage, how bad does the grass need to be mowed, and are you willing to mow it with that 20-inch? That's kind of where we are with phase 2 as we sit today. Static groups of 25, which is under the stipulation that we work under now, because You may or may not have followed it, but House Bill 59 was a bill that was put into place and authored to prevent some frivolous lawsuits, to protect educational other agencies from frivolous lawsuits, and was headed to the desk for the governor to sign when there was an amendment put on it, which means that the minimum standards of safety concerns which now is under state statute under Act 9. That in itself has put Bessie in a position to mandate minimum standards to all of our schools. And that said, we can't get ahead of that as the LHSA, even though we're a private entity. Everybody keeps saying you're a private entity. Even private entity or not, we share the same commodity, which are the student athletes of our state, 100,000 plus in participation. And we are not going to do anything that gets our school principals and or superintendents and athletic directors out ahead of anything that's going on in the state. So as long as that's in place, Act 9 is now in place. If those schools in our state, I'm going to talk about those 9 through 12, 7 through 12 with some of the smaller classifications, if they want that immunity bill, they want that immunity to stay in compliance, then we're going to stay in that role and not do anything that would force them to do something other than that. And I think that's important for your viewers to understand that is that LSU, I have a number of conversations with Senior Athletic Director Verge Osbury. Him and I talk a lot, so I'm in communication with what's going on at LSU. They might be able to have a complete different amount of people in the stands and can start doing different things. They're not under the Bessie board, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Ed. We're not under them, but everybody that we work with is. So we're going to stay in line with them, stay in line with what the governor says, and move forward as we need to.
So as I hear you kind of explain that, it sounds to me like in order for the schools to receive this immunity and not be able to be touched on any frivolous lawsuits, they have to follow the guidelines that are set forth by the Bessie board.
That is correct.
And the LHSA has said we're lockstep in
Absolutely.
with that. We're going to follow whatever guidelines they set forward. That kind of protects all your members. And the bottom line is you can't get ahead of that. If there's schools out there that want to do something different, then they no longer will be in the LHSAA, and they're welcome to have at it.
I think they'll have bigger fish to fry before they ever have to deal with us. But at this particular point, Ronnie, we're preparing for probably a delayed start of seasons. Okay, no cancellation. We're not talking about canceling anything. We're talking about potential delays, and we'll see what happens this week, and then we'll work accordingly. But we have plans that we're putting into place, and we'll be able to publicize those. But we're working on it. But as you said earlier, whatever we decide today, Monday, may not be what we do Wednesday, because it's something we're going to find out tomorrow. So we're going to continue to keep it on a whiteboard and work our way through it. But believe me, we're going to do what's deliberate, safe, and at no point going to put athletes, the coaches, the athletic trainers, any medical personnel, anybody at risk to get in a game. But know that we're going to have outbreaks. There's going to be a case or cases at schools, and we're going to deal with that. We're not going to hold it against the school per our rules, because they had a football coach, offensive coordinator, who also is the social studies teacher. Now they know he's positive, have to pull him out, contact trace. That could be all the coaching staff of that varsity football team, the athletes of their offensive side of the football, and maybe the students that he had in class. We're not going to hold against the schools, man. This state is used to having limited schedules because of hurricanes. Mm-hmm. Just because it happens a hurricane comes in along the coast down here doesn't mean we shut down schools in Shreveport, unless, of course, the storm goes up that way. But my point is that it's different for the state.
Yeah, you're saying, and what I'm hearing you is that you may have some schools that play more games than others.
That's exactly,
based on what's going on with the spike in COVID in their area.
That's exactly correct. You know, it's called common sense.
Sure.
And that's what we're going to use.
Well, we'll take a commercial break. When we come back from it, I want to ask you. We're going to stretch. Okay. What I want to ask you then is, from a standpoint of if student athletes don't go to class, and we know that there's a lot of schools talking about and having the conversation about, taking classes at home like they did in the spring, online. You've got some schools and superintendents that are giving students the option.
Correct.
Hey, you can come to school part-time during the week, 2-3 days during the week, do the rest at home. You can elect to opt out and stay home and do everything online, or come full-time. I mean, you're hearing that from a lot of parishes where the students now and the families are getting those options. How does that affect eligibility to be able to play fall sports, football, volleyball, cross country, if they're not going to school full-time or even part-time? If they're staying home, are they still eligible to play?
Well, first of all, those students that participated in school last year, whatever the delivery system was, whatever that platform was, if they met the requirements, which is a minimum GPA and a minimum number of credits passed, they're eligible this year by the rule, it says you have to pass those credits with a certain GPA by the time semester prior to participation. So now for them, no matter what the delivery system is, and you're right, there's numerous modules and modalities that they're using for that, which is fine. But as long as they have met the criterion from spring last year, which for the most part everybody passed. I mean, It was one of those situations where depending on we were going to take into consideration. But this fall they have to have the number of credits necessary as well as the GPA necessary, and taking those classes, they're good to go. So regardless of whether they're on campus all day or not, whether it be distance learning or virtual learning or homeschool for some parishes that permit that, or if it's a part-time in and out, okay? So all of that's going to make them eligible, and we rely, as always, the local education LEAs, local education agencies, to monitor all that for us. So whatever they haven't put in place, they know the minimum standard for the LHSAA, and they're going to adhere to that, as well as all the other minimum standard mandates that are coming from Bessie on social distancing, masks, temperature check, sanitization, all of the other things that they have, including the transportation woes you have, how many students you can have on a bus, how many do not. It's amazing our population across the state, how many schools depend on public transportation in school districts to get their students to campus. So you mentioned earlier you don't envy the position I'm in. I don't envy the position that the superintendents and principals are in right now, and those respective parish boards, of having to make these decisions to get the students there. And if they don't want to come because they're still leery and they're going to stay home, how that works. But that's all up to the local LEA. I think there's a few parishes that have come out and said that if your body isn't in the building, in brick and mortar, you're not going to play sports.
Right.
That's their choice. I get complaints about that. Hey, that's why we have local education agencies. They make those decisions, and we rely on that. Because at the end of the day, I answer to not only all the 404 principals, my 25-member executive committee that is liaisons for all the principals, 64 plus state school superintendents, on any given day, the 100 plus legislators who have involved, but in a good way involved. So I answer to a lot of people, but I focus on what we need to do for the students, and that's my biggest concern, Ronnie, is the 100,000 athletes we have.
Now we'll go to commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about a scenario that developed in Mississippi, and if that's something that, who knows what will happen over the next weeks ahead. But the city of Jackson, the county that houses Jackson, Mississippi, they've elected and made the decision not to play sports in the fall, which has kind of made a free-for-all for a lot of those athletes. We'll talk about that a little bit more with Eddie Bonine, the executive director of Louisiana High School Athletic Association. Strange times over at the facility as they're trying to deal with this pandemic and all the goings on. Things change day to day, week to week, and so we're giving you a little bit of info with Mr. Bonine here today on Sports Charts. We'll be back with more, presented by LeBears Casino.
If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau St. Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase.
Welcome back, everyone, to Sports Shorts, presented by LaBear's Casino over here at Scoreboard. You see the Southern University tablecloth that we have here. There's an all-day fundraiser going on for Southern University over at Scoreboards on Coursey Boulevard in Baton Rouge, and so that's why we're taping the show here. And obviously, Southern, like all the SWAC schools, playing football in the spring next year. We've seen a lot of 1AA conferences, the MEAC. We saw the Ivy League is doing that, and I'm sure others to follow have as well. Football in the spring. That came up for a little bit early on in the summer. There was some discussion that some other potential schools around, high schools around the country may do the same. Was there ever any serious consideration given to that? And if so, why the decision not to move it to the spring?
There was conversation put together in a proposal from football coaches and others, if you will, and we had an advisory, coaches advisory Zoom meeting, and it was for those other sports outside of football. They were not buying what was being sold on moving the spring. Too many moving parts. So our main goal now is to shorten seasons if we need to, compact, get to where we have an 8-game, a 7-game, a 6-game districts only. But we know some in football specifically, some districts are larger than others. So we're taking that all into consideration. But we've only had a couple of states that have done that, where they've actually moved sports. They may have, most recently, a state went to a 6-week winter, a 6-week winter season starting in January, then a 6 weeks fall, and then a 6-week spring with no championships, just to play.
Right.
And we're too many moving parts. I truly believe that either through therapeutics, with what we're doing, and that's using these, if you will, and all the mitigating measures were to take care of Ronnie. I truly believe that if we do that, Louisiana is very resilient. I think we can come back to where we need to, whether it be college football, high school football, or any of our fall sports, moving into winter sports as well. Because think about this: what are we going to do when wrestling rolls around?
Right.
You know, that kind of stuff. So we're trying to look forward with that.
So currently, football, the state championships are usually held, that first weekend in December, or first or second weekend in December. In your mind, as the executive director of the LHSAA, and you've already mentioned on the show that delaying the start of the season in all fall sports is a real possibility and something you guys are looking at. But what's the most important? Is it to get these guys, say, or athletes of any sport, a decent amount of games, half their games at least, or is it to name a state champion? And what I mean by that is there a scenario where, we don't worry about playoffs and we just make sure we get them as many games as they possibly can in whatever sport it is? Or is it, well, we want to make sure we maintain our playoffs and state championships first and foremost?
Well, good question, and I'll answer it this way. We feel as though the championships are still important, but we want to make sure that we have enough season to validate that when it comes to the playoffs. If we're playing half the season, then we're going to definitely change the playoff structure and how many teams qualify. And if we start at 7 games, which 7 games or 8 games usually will get all of the district play, depending upon the larger districts to play, and it allows for 1 or 2 games for schools that maybe not in their district, but they're natural rivalries. They've always played each other. Maybe different divisions, if you will, or different classifications, but they always compete against each other. And it allows for some wiggle room if we do have a school or schools that have contract, have contact with the virus, and we're having to delay or cancel some games. So we're going to work our way through that part, but the Prep Classic at the Superdome is not the end-all, be-all. I know that because we had a number of schools that chose not to play in there. But at the end of the day, anybody who has played there feels it's pretty important. It's not just a destination, man. It's a place that everybody has a chance to play where the Saints play, and the only time I've ever seen that facility is when they watch the Saints on TV. So it's very important that a piece of that. So we kept that in mind. I've contacted the SMG, the management company of the Superdome, and I have a good rapport with them, and we're looking at potentially other dates if we have to slide or do something. Of course, at the time they were talking about potentially the Bayou Classic, and that's not going to right now could not happen.
Spring,
it may not happen until the spring. Saints in the playoffs, not in the playoffs. Are they a wild card? Are they home seat? All of that stuff we're looking at, because the longer the Saints stay in the playoffs, the longer the carpet remains on the floor of the dome, because they're going through major innovations preparing for the 2024 Super Bowl. So we have to take all those moving parts into place, but we're also, if we can't get in there, we're still planning on having a championship. So I think at the end of the day, we want the season to have integrity to the point that we know that whether we played 5 games, 6 games, 7 games, or in volleyball, if we played 25 or whatever number it is, the same amount of cross-country runs, that when we had the same amount of pool time, that when we do crown a champion, they earned it. And it wasn't something that's going to have an asterisk by it because of the shortened season.
The timeline as far as, right now you set the guidelines about a week or so ago relative to the month of August, and we know today as we tape, August 3rd is a big day for football teams because they can get out in the helmets and dummies and things like that. And of course you got them grouped off in groups of 25, so 25 in a grouping is the max you can have. The other end of the field can be the other 25, that sort of thing. So you've got some guidelines in place to get the ball moving for all fall sports. But school's coming. We're a week or two away in some parishes where school's supposed to be coming. How do you adjust, and how do the rules adjust to parish XYZ says we're going to delay the start of school to after Labor Day? Another parish says, well, we're gonna start school, but we're not going to allow extracurricular activities. How does the LHSAA handle that?
We're going to address the majority, and if a specific parish for whatever reason decides that they're not going to participate, okay. And we will work our way through the district play. We'll work our way with not including them in the schedules, and those will become voids, if you will. If they want to participate in a lesser fashion, or if they want to start later, like you mentioned, maybe after Labor Day or beyond there, then okay. But if they do that, then we have to understand, if it's football, that they're going to need 4 weeks, 2 weeks to toughen up the soft tissue, all the things you need for football to get them ready to start slobber knocking, right? Those are things we got to do, and we'll do that. So we'll work with them in that regard, but we're not going to turn our back on them. But we also know that they're making decisions, because that's why they call it the local education agency. They know what's best for their parish, not me sitting on 12720 Old Hammond Highway here in Baton Rouge. It's not me. They're doing that, and we'll make adjustments as need be. But we're not going to hold it against them, Ronnie. We're going to use common sense and try to get as much participation for as many athletes as we can to get past this and work our way into winter sports and work our way into spring sports and try to make this thing happen, and do it with common sense, but also do it with safety and precautionary measures in compliance with whatever regulations or guidance we're getting from the governor's office, our CDC, the National Federation's Sports Medicine Advisory, our Sports Medicine Advisory, all go in the same direction with the Superintendent's Association, School Board Association, Principal Association, Teacher Association, as well as the state school board. So all that stuff, all go in the same direction. Kind of like the contraflow, man. We're all going the same way, different speeds, but we've got to get it done.
So you've made it clear that, we've talked about it for a minute. Fall sports are staying fall sports. They're not moving to the spring. You'll adjust the schedule according to get as many games as you possibly can. You even considering sliding state championship dates if need be.
Correct.
Changing the number of teams that make the playoffs if need be, to try to make sure we get an equitable amount of regular season games in whatever sport it is. But obviously most people focus on football. What about fans in the stands? And is that a scenario that literally will change week to week? Could you start the season with no fans, but then eventually move to fans?
You are correct, and it's a good question also, Ronnie, because at this particular point, we don't tell schools what to do when it comes to a flu outbreak or any other kind of outbreak, or whatever it might be within their respective school or their area, right? So when it comes down to how many fans are in the stands, it's still going to be under the guise of what Bessie says and what the governor says, because as I mentioned to you earlier, what the governor does in regards to, right now we're in phase 2 with a static group of 50 and some 50% occupancy. I mean, that's not us. Bessie's what we're doing. That's what the governor's saying, and he's endorsed that. So by it being a state law under Act 9, he's not going to step on that by no means. So what LSU can do with 35,000 or 32,000 or whatever it is, if they go 50%, whatever it is, they can do that. We don't work that way. But if school A, let's just say we move to a static group of 250, which is what we had in March down there, and I'm thinking, okay, what 250 am I going to let in?
Right.
Okay, so I took the other route and said we're not letting anybody in except the teams, the officials, the TV crew, the radio announcers, anything we're doing with streaming. So we did it that way, and financially it cost us. But at the end of the day, that money wasn't the issue for me. It was about getting the games in for the kids and the coaches,
sure.
And they were very appreciative of that. That's the same approach I'm going to take this fall. I said it before, and I got some heat for it. Imagine that. If we can get coaches coaching kids and the athletes on fields and courts and meets and doing the things they're going to do, that's a plus for Eddie and the LHSAA and our student athletes. Sorry, mom and dad, aunt and uncle, everybody else. We're going to try to stream what we can stream, but at the end of the day, that stuff is more important right now. They need that, Ronnie, but most importantly, our students need to start learning again, regardless of the learning model. Ideally, you'd like to have them back, a body in a building. but maybe that's not going to work for everybody. And if it doesn't, there's still got to get them working this first. Get them back thinking and doing what you have to do with that. And then once we do that, we are going to, in a very cautious manner, thread athletics back into it, at no point putting our schools in a position where they're going to have to violate something by doing so.
You've been in this business a long time. You know, obviously the head guy in the state of Nevada before becoming the head guy for the high schools and sports in Louisiana. Of all the different things that you've had to deal with, obviously you were in education back during 9/11, and then since you've been here, you've had hurricanes and natural disasters and floods and everything to deal with. But they come and go, and they're a window, and you deal with it, and you move on, you grow out of it. This is something that obviously we don't know when the end is in sight. This is a game changer financially for the LHSAA, schools. It's a game changer in a lot of different ways. How can you stay positive, and what do you do to try to keep moving forward?
Because I don't want to have to make the decision I made in the end of winter and in the spring, and that's cancel. Just cancel. That's a C word. I don't want to ever have to do that again. And I will do everything I can with that glass half full. And our association and our staff, it's about can, not can't. And we're going to have some hurdles, but we can get past that. And at the end of the day, all Louisianians need to do what we need to do with masks, social distancing, whatever it is, because if you want to see LSU football and La Tech and UL Monroe, all of our Nichols, all of them, you want to see them play this fall, and you want to see high school football or high school cross country, swimming, or volleyball, then we got to do what we need to do together for our students, and I think that's the plan. I don't want to have to be like I did in March, and we were good with that, so can't do it again.
Also, before we let you go, condolences to Eric Held and his family.
Absolutely.
His dad passed away due to the COVID. What's Eric's title?
He's the director of the Coaches Association, doing a hell of a job.
Great
just
guy.
Put on an incredible virtual coaches clinic that we normally have this month. Did it virtual, and it was awesome, including Mississippi, Arkansas, and North Dakota.
Eddie, thanks so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Appreciate
Anytime,
it.
Ron.
He's Eddie Bonan. You've been watching Sports Shorts presented by LeBears Casino.
If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau St. Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase.
Can't get enough sports shorts? Tune into Sports Shorts TV on Cox HD Channel 1013 Mondays at 8, Tuesdays at 9, and ETEL Channel 4. That's 52 weeks a year to get educated on sports by the best. Joel Davis and Ronnie Rance.